In today's episode of Locked On Oilers, another nasty loss for the Oilers in Los Angeles. What went wrong and what needs to happen for the Oilers moving forward? Plus, we are going to talk about some potential additions for the Oilers as the rumors are swirling once again. And to wrap up today's episode, the WHL and CHL trade deadline has wrapped up. What have been the biggest moves so far and how do they impact Edmonton Oilers prospects? All that and much more in today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to start off with that difficult loss against the Los Angeles Kings, as it just keeps getting worse for the Oilers. And honestly, it might be the point of pressing the panic button in Edmonton. We'll talk about that in a second. But also on today's episode, with that panic button, who can the Edmonton Oilers bring in that'll help them now? That is the big thing. Who can help the Edmonton Oilers now? We have a couple of names that have been swirling around, and yes, we've talked about them before, but now it's time for action. We'll talk about that a little later. And to wrap up today's episode, as mentioned, the CHL and more specifically, the WHL Trade Deadline has wrapped up with an Edmonton Oiler on the move. Well, an Edmonton Oiler prospect, and as well, a guy who's played in the NHL is also on the move. We will talk about that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcasts. Alrighty, let's get into this loss against the Los Angeles Kings. A 6-3 loss at the Crypt. Let's be real, it's the Staples Center. I will never not call that the Staples Center. Never not call that this, or whatever. Either way, you know what I'm saying. The Edmonton Oilers lose in that building once again. And it's a cause for controversy, for discussion, a lot to talk about when it comes to the officiating. As I have the numbers here, 15 minor penalties, 6 major penalties, and a game misconduct, as Clem Costin was handed a game misconduct for his fight at the end of the game for instigating. What a hero call that was. Once again, the referees getting some face time when they don't deserve face time. We'll talk about how poorly the Edmonton Oilers played in a second, because yes, the Edmonton Oilers did play poorly. 0 for 6 on the power play in a game that they should have. Not probably, they 100% should have had the upper hand in, and the Los Angeles Kings just tore them apart there. But where I want to tear apart is at the officiating. Consistency. That is all any hockey fan asks for, is consistency. If you're going to call one thing on one side, you better call it on the other. If you're going to let one thing go, you're gotta have to let the other thing go for the rest of the game. You're setting a precedent for the rest of the game for these players. And when you're sitting there and have zero consistency, the game is no longer in the hands of the players. It is in the hands of the officials. And it doesn't matter what the players do. It doesn't matter how the power play is doing, how the penalty kill is doing. It doesn't matter. The game is in the hands of the officials. And that is not what hockey is, what the NHL stands for, and what these fans want to see. You wonder why fans, or why the game of hockey isn't growing in the States. It's because even their own officials don't even know the rules, and they just let the officials go. As Daniel Nugent-Hopkins put on Twitter today, that too many men call. He was about, I believe it was Tyson Barrie, was about 20 feet away from the boards before Evan Bouchard jumped onto the ice. Evan Bouchard took the shot from the point. Tyson Barrie was clearly off the ice by the time that Evan Bouchard took the shot. Now it is coming out that, oh, well, you have to be 5 feet away from the boards. Well, excuse me, because every single change in the NHL has a situation like that. So you better be calling every single change that tight every single time. But no, you're not. And it's a situation that is the Edmonton Oilers were starting to get momentum and they lost it. In fact, they were on the power play at the time. The Edmonton Oilers score a goal in the third period, and then Evan Bouchard just gets one of the worst interference calls of all time, and you kill the momentum for the Edmonton Oilers. You call Darnell Nurse on slashing when the opposition, Kevin Fiala, if I'm not mistaken, is going in for the Michigan. What the hell are defensemen supposed to do, and goaltenders, for that matter, supposed to do to defend the Michigan? You're giving all of the power to the offensive player and just none and handcuffing the defensive player. That's a joke. That's a joke. But there's a reason why the Edmonton Oilers lost. Yes, the Edmonton Oilers had one less penalty than the one less power play, than the Los Angeles Kings. The Edmonton Oilers power play was god awful. Not able to shoot the puck. The passing lanes were just all tied up by the Los Angeles Kings, and it was the exact same penalty kill that the Kings deployed against the Oilers in the playoffs, just clogging up the middle, not allowing those cross-ice east-west passes that the Edmonton Oilers love, either to Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, and then have a guy like Zach Hyman clean up the mess if there is one. And that is where the Los Angeles Kings won that game. 0 for 6, the Edmonton Oilers went on the power play. 4 of the Los Angeles Kings' 6 goals came on the power play. We talked yesterday. I ate my words clean off a plate yesterday, saying if this game gets into a run and gun special team type game, the Edmonton Oilers might have the advantage. Well, guess what? The Edmonton Oilers had anything but the advantage, and the Edmonton Oilers let the Los Angeles Kings have that advantage. I don't understand the pulling of Stuart Skinner. With 21 saves at the time. It was 3-1 when he's getting pulled. Jack Campbell came in and played a fantastic game. That goal that they called is absolutely atrocious. How can you find an angle that genuinely says that puck is fully over the line? Because, yes, that puck was across the line, but with that angle above Campbell's glove, that puck was over the line, or was on the line, not over the line. So how can you dictate that puck is over the line? And how can you see the puck is over the line? Tough break for a guy who's having a really good game in Jack Campbell. Made a ton of saves that the Edmonton Oilers, that kept the Edmonton Oilers in this game. I don't understand the pulling of Stuart Skinner, especially considering Jack Campbell is going to have to play against Anaheim and San Jose on Wednesday and Friday. But I guess that's why I'm not behind the bench. Jack Campbell, 11 saves on 13 shots. As mentioned, Stewie, 21 of 24. I do want to send a quick congratulations to Stuart and his partner for the birth of their first child, expected, I believe, on Thursday, so congratulations there. But let's get to some positives in this one, as the physicality was up for the Edmonton Oilers. Klim Kostin, Jesse Puljujarvi, and Zach Hyman all dropping the gloves for the Edmonton Oilers, and all against very worthy opponents. Philip Deneau, Sean Durzi, and Brendan Lemieux. And the Oilers stood their own. The Edmonton Oilers need to keep that going in order to keep winning games. But how sustainable is it really? Obviously, you're not going to sit there and go, oh yeah, I want 3 fights a game. Because it's not the 1980s anymore. I know that comes to a shock to a lot of Edmonton Oilers fans. Remember the days when you could get a hockey player for winning a backgammon game? Anyways, this has a lot of negatives. This game has a lot of negatives in it, especially considering this is a team who sits above you in the standings, who you're going to be fighting for down the stretch for playoff position. And in both situations, or in both games so far this year, you have looked far from impressive. It's a shame. Because if you go into games like that against the Vegas Golden Knights, not going to have a good outcome. If you go into a game like that against the Dallas Stars, the Winnipeg Jets, you're going to get torched. And right now, I don't know where the Edmonton Oilers go. The Edmonton Oilers, a 6-3 loss to the Los Angeles Kings last night. They fall to 21-18-3. They look to improve on that record on Wednesday when they go to Anaheim, Disneyland, baby. They head to Anaheim for an 8 o'clock puck drop at the Honda Center, the Duck Pond. Remember when it was the pond? Either way, let's move on to what the Edmonton Oilers can do to help this team. Rumors are swirling around this team. Sounds like the Edmonton Oilers are looking to make a move. But who is out there and what is the best option? We will talk about that in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season. Yes, I know that's ending now, but I'm sure you watched the final last night, and we all know that was a... Thanks for showing up, TCU. Anyways, you can also get basketball, and even though the World Cup is over, the Premier League is still going on. Manchester United is going to the semifinals of the Carabao Cup. That's all I care about. Either way, if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to this one, you probably do, they got those at BetOnline as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alrighty, let's move on to some trade targets for the Edmonton Oilers. There's been some rumors swirling around. Pierre LeBrun and Darren Dreger are starting to feed into the fun for Edmonton Oilers fans, as they have heard that the Edmonton Oilers are working the phones here. They have said that the Edmonton Oilers have checked in on Jacob Chychrun, Joel Edmondson, basically any team who could be potentially selling a defenseman. That's good to hear. Now, there was one name that came up today that has me very intrigued. We'll keep the name to the end here, but the team who currently has them is in a playoff spot right now, has not been vocal on wanting to sell this player in any way, but it does sound like a couple teams are starting to swirl on this player. We will release, or I will talk about this player at the end of this segment, so stay tuned for that. But of course, guys like Jacob Chychrun, John Klingberg, and Vladislav Gavrikov have all been names that the Edmonton Oilers have been linked to. Let's go through some of their stats and really talk about what type of player they are, what they would bring to the Edmonton Oilers, and what if they are the best option for the Edmonton Oilers in the trade market. Let's start off with the obvious one, Jacob Chychrun, as he has been in trade conversations for about a year and a half now, really, trade rumors, really. And fair enough. He's a guy who has numerous years still on his deal and is under team control until 2025. Plus, Arizona wants to move him because his modified no trade clause, it kicks in next year. It is a 10-team no trade clause, so that really limits the amount of resources the Arizona Coyotes could get, especially if a team like the Oilers are on that deal, like the Ottawa Senators. However it may be, the Edmonton Oilers are starting to circle on Jacob Chychrun, and it makes sense. So far this year, 23 games played, 5 goals, 13 assists 18 points. Now, what I've done and taken all of these defensemen and got their goals for per 60 minutes and their goals against per 60 minutes and compared them to where they would be on the Edmonton Oilers and see how they would help the Oilers. Plus, I've also added the expected goals against per 60 minutes here. So let's start off with the 5-on-5 goals for per 60 minutes for Jakob Chychrun, and he would be in a very impressive spot here for the Edmonton Oilers. He has a 2.98 goals for per 60 minutes this season with the Arizona Coyotes, and that would put him in third on the Edmonton Oilers. Third. Above Connor McDavid. Above Connor McDavid. Now, the defensive stats at 5-on-5 isn't the best. He has a 3.2 5-on-5 goals against per 60 minutes, which would put him in 21st, for the Edmonton Oilers. But then you take a look at at all situations for Chychrun, and he would really fit in perfectly for the Edmonton Oilers. A 3.75 goals for per 60 minutes in all situations would put him 7th on the Edmonton Oilers, above Evan Bouchard. And a 2.61 goals against per 60 minutes, which would put him 6th on the Edmonton Oilers. He also plays on a very bad Arizona Coyotes team. And the fact that he's putting up these types of numbers this year is very impressive. Plus, he's also coming back from an injury. That is also impressive. Now, his expected goals against per 60 minutes in all situations would put him in last for the Edmonton Oilers. But what that tells me is that he is not only swinging above his weight here, but what he's really doing is shutting down high-quality chances. Not allowing the other team in situations where it seems like they should be scoring, they aren't. He goes from an expected goals against per 60 minutes at a 3 in all situations at a 3.25 to a 2.61 goals against per 60 in actual goals against per 60 minutes. That's important. That is important. I think Jakob Chychrun is probably, as of right now, and we'll move on to some of these other players, I think he's the best possible option. Adds a little bit of offensive touch for the Edmonton Oilers, all the while still being effective in his own end, and that is important. The Edmonton Oilers, a guy like Darnell Nurse, who is effective in both ends sometimes, but not as much as a guy who's younger than him in Jakob Chychrun, and a guy who the Edmonton Oilers can have control over for the next couple of years. Let's move on to John Klingberg of the Anaheim Ducks, who's having a quietly decent season as well for the Ducks. In 34 games so far this year, 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points. Of those 5 goals, 3 of them are game winners for the Anaheim Ducks. That is very impressive for Klingberg. In fact, one of them being against the Edmonton Oilers. Let's add to the advanced stats here a little bit, as this is where Klingberg comes off my board. And again, on a very bad Anaheim Ducks team. But if the Anaheim Ducks are expecting a first-round pick for John Klingberg after his advanced stats, after all the stuff that he can really do, after all the questions that come up when a player like this is dealt, plus you're trading for a guy who has a 1-year, $7 million contract without the guarantee that he's going to re-sign with your team. That's way too many variables for me to send a first-round pick or even a prospect for me. So we'll see. But those advanced stats at 5-on-5 are awful, and all situations are awful as well. He would sit 15th on the Oilers in goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 once again with a 2.03. At 5-on-5, his goals against per 60 minutes would be last on the Edmonton Oilers with a 4.1. And they don't get any better in all situations. Last on the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to goals against per 60 minutes in all situations. And 14th when it comes to goals for per 60 minutes as well. He would also rank last when it comes to expected goals against. Now, we talked about the difference between having a high goals against, or expected goals against, and an actual goals against. His actual goals against per 60 minutes to his expected goals against per 60 minutes isn't that different. It's not that different. His expected goals against is a 4.21, and his actual goals against in all situations is a 4.03. Not adding a lot to the Edmonton Oilers, especially considering both of those numbers would sit last on the team. That doesn't help the Oilers at all. What are you doing? What in what world would that help the Edmonton Oilers? There's no world. I'm sorry, but there's no world, especially considering the price tag. If it was a little less and Anaheim was willing to retain, maybe I'd send a second-round pick. But other than that, there's just not a lot to John Klingberg that really appeals to me. Maybe his size, I guess. But again, he's 30 years old. You can't exactly sign him to a 7-year deal. Plus, he's already making $7 million. How much do you think his next deal is going to cost? Sorry, but that's not for me. Next up is Vladislav Gavrikov from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, not a name that has come out today with the Edmonton Oilers, but a name that has been circled for the Edmonton Oilers for quite a while now. Gavrikov having an interesting season, to say the least, especially considering he's on a very bad Columbus Blue Jackets team, too. 39 games played, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points, and both of those goals as well being game winners for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, there's a lot of love given to Vladislav Gavrikov for some reason, not sure why. Well, no, that's not fair. I shouldn't say that. But especially this year, and again, we talked about it with Klingberg and Chychrun. He's not on a very good hockey team. But he's just not doing the things that would help the Edmonton Oilers now. He's not an offensive defenseman, so I'm not really going to mention his offensive stats, as both of them sit under a 2.31, essentially. So not really worried about that, but it's his defensive stats that worry me. His goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 sits at a 3.18, which would be 20th on the Edmonton Oilers. However, that would be above Ryan Nugent-Hopkins at 5-on-5 and below Evan Bouchard. Evan Bouchard sits at 19th, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, currently sits at 20th, and Vladislav Gavrikov would slip right in between those two players. Then, in all situations, Vladislav Gavrikov would sit in last at goals against per 60 minutes in all situations with a 4.38, which is not very different from his expected goals against, which sits at a 4.42, only 0.04 points lower than his expected goals against. That is not a player who's going to help the Edmonton Oilers. Now, Gavrikov, an easy deal to take on, but he is a UFA at the end of the year, has a $2.8 million cap hit, but as mentioned, is a free agent at the end of the year. Is he worth it? Maybe he's worth taking a shot in the offseason, but when the Edmonton Oilers need a player now who's going to be an impact player, he is not it, especially considering the potential price tag as well. Probably a first-round pick here. And finally, you stuck around for the ghost name for the Edmonton Oilers here. And the name that's been tossed around today, as the Edmonton Oilers and the Ottawa Senators have been kicking tires on the Minnesota Wild's Matt Dumba. Now, we talked about Dumba earlier on this year. I threw him into a kind of similar comparison sheet of defensemen on how they could potentially help the Edmonton Oilers this year. And Matt Dumba was one of those players. As mentioned, again, he wasn't expected in there. I just threw him in because I thought it would be a good look for the Edmonton Oilers. And now it seems like the Edmonton Oilers could potentially be kicking tires on Matt Dumba. Now, the thing about Matt Dumba and the Minnesota Wild specifically is that the Minnesota Wild are in a playoff spot right now. And it is reported that A, they aren't shopping him, but B, that they need him on the defense for this team. So if the Minnesota Wild do end up taking a shot and moving Matt Dumba, it sounds like they would most likely want to make a move that would help both teams in what we call a hockey trade. Now, Matt Dumba is in the final year of his contract. He signed a 5-year, $30 million contract back in 2018. He actually signed it July 21st, 2018. But he does have a modified no-trade clause, but he is a Western Canadian kid. If I'm not mistaken, he may even be from Edmonton, if I'm not mistaken as well. So a kid who is, he's from Regina, Saskatchewan, but played for the Red Deer Rebels, some ties to Alberta, obviously, as well. So there's some obvious ties there. He's also been pretty solid in his career on the offensive end, has a career high of 14 goals back in 2017, 2018, played all 82 games, in fact, in that year. He also had 36 assists and 50 points. So he has an offensive touch. He's shown that as well way back when he was playing with the Rebels as well. So he has that offensive edge, and it's even kind of showed, not really, I should say showed, but when you compare it to the Edmonton Oilers and what he brings defensively, more specifically, but also when you pair that, with the offensive talent that he potentially can bring, there may be a little player here. 39 games played for Dumba so far this year. 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points for him. Now, as mentioned, in the last couple of years, he's regressed a little bit when it comes to offensive prowess. Only 7 goals last year, which is up from the last couple of years where he had 6 goals each in the previous 2 years. But that is also a large regression from his 12, 14, and 11 from the 3 seasons before. But he has been focusing more on his defensive end, and when you take a look at what he would bring to the Edmonton Oilers, he would be one of the best defensive players on the Edmonton Oilers. A 1.9 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 would put him at 4th on the Edmonton Oilers, above Evander Kane, who has missed some time, but has sustained a pretty good goals against per 60 minutes, considering where the team is now. And B, he is actually a very effective player in his own end, is Evander Kane, but when it comes to all situations, Matt Dumba would sit 10th on the Edmonton Oilers in goals against per 60 minutes in all situations with a 2.88. Which is also better than his expected goals against, which would be at an even 3. That's a player who's bringing something. Matt Dumba also has a bite to his game that not a lot of players, especially on the Edmonton Oilers, would bring. He would be a very exciting pairing, top pairing, middle pairing guy even for the Edmonton Oilers. I'm looking at a pairing with Tyson Barrie, Cody Ceci, Darnell Nurse, and Matt Dumba would be a fantastic pairing for the Oilers. A lot of grit, a lot of puck movement there, a lot of potential shutdown cycle plays. I think he would be a good fit with the Edmonton Oilers. I know some people don't like Matt Dumba. As mentioned, he is in the last year of his deal, and through the last couple of years on that deal, he has played very good hockey. So, yeah, it may be at a steep price, especially considering the Wild consider him a player they still need. but maybe a name to keep an eye on. Heading closer to the NHL trade deadline. Who do you want the Edmonton Oilers to get here? Let's be realistic here. I didn't mention Erik Karlsson because that contract is absolutely insane. No, the Edmonton Oilers aren't moving Darnell Nurse. I swear if I see that comment again, I'm going to delete it. It is just, it's 2023. As mentioned, you don't move players with a game of backgammon. So it's a little more difficult to move players nowadays, and you're not putting them on waivers. Either way, who do you want to see the Edmonton Oilers to add? Who do you want to see the Edmonton Oilers potentially move or even to look at as well? You let me know, and I'll take a look at them and take a look how conceivable that really is. Either way, let's move on to our final segment of today's show, and that is the WHL Trade Deadline, as a lot of movement for, well, let's be real here, a lot of crazy trades in the WHL so far this year, and some moves directly and indirectly affecting Edmonton Oilers prospects. We will talk about that in just a second, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I started using AG1 because I wanted to better my gut health and optimize my immune system. Plus, I wanted a supplement that wasn't going to taste really gross and take a whole bunch, like a million pills really. So that is exactly what I get with AG1. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of the things. All of the things. Plus, it's lifestyle friendly as well. Whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it is all good for you. Plus, it contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, all while still tasting great. It costs less than $3 a day, so you are investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Plus, Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by professional athletes. Right now, it is time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop of AG1 in a cup of water every day. That is it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Alrighty, as mentioned, a crazy day, or crazy couple of days really, in the CHL and the WHL more specifically, as WHL may be the place to watch junior hockey, as a lot of crazy moves being made on the trade deadline and around the trade deadline for the WHL. And one team specifically has potentially become the greatest WHL team of all time. And that team is Edmonton Oilers' first-round pick from last year, Reed Schaefer on it. Yes, the Seattle Thunderbirds. As the Seattle Thunderbirds made not 1, not 2, but 3 massive acquisitions, plus they also got the commitment of Brad Lambert on their team for this coming, or for the rest of the year, I should say, as the Winnipeg Jets have sent Brad Lambert to the Seattle Thunderbirds. But the Seattle Thunderbirds weren't done there, as the Seattle Thunderbirds also acquired Colton Dach. Yes, the Colton Dach who played for Canada at the World Juniors. For Ethan Mittelstadt, Ty Hurley, a first-round pick in 2024, a second-round conditional pick in 2025, and a conditional fourth-round pick in 2023. The Thunderbirds also getting a fifth-round pick in 2024 there. As mentioned, they weren't done there, as the Seattle Thunderbirds, I'm still trying to find all these moves here, as they have just been insanely busy in this trade deadline. The Seattle Thunderbirds would then go on to acquire former Edmonton Oil King, current Arizona Coyote player, also the player who would go on to win the World Juniors for Canada, scoring the golden goal in overtime for Canada, Edmontonian himself, Dylan Guenther, in an absolutely insane trade. The Seattle Thunderbirds would acquire Dylan Guenther, the rights to Dylan Guenther, the rights to Jordan Ramsey as well, and a 2023 eighth round pick in exchange for Koji Gibson, a conditional 2026 first round pick, a 2023 second round pick, a 2024 fourth round pick, a conditional 2026 fourth round pick, a conditional 2025 fourth round pick as well, a conditional fifth round pick in 2026, and a conditional 2024 sixth round pick as well. An absolutely bonkers trade there, coming in just under the deadline there for the Seattle Thunderbirds. And they now have, again, as mentioned, probably the greatest WHL team of all time, maybe even junior hockey team ever. They now have Brad Lambert, Reed Schaefer, Colton Dach, Lucas Siona, who is, the next player is a draft pick for this year. Grayson Sachin, who is going to be a top pick in this next year's draft. Jerome Iginla's son, Tij Iginla. Nolan Allen, who played for the Canadian junior hockey team as well. Luke Prokop, who played for the Edmonton Oil Kings last year. Kevin Korchinski, who went 7th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks last year. Dylan Guenther, and the goaltender who stole the show for Canada at the World Juniors, Thomas Milic. Oh, by the way, did I mention Reed Schaefer too? They came so close to winning the WHL last year and cementing their way to the Memorial Cup, There are a lot of teams in the WHL today that are going to be very exciting to watch, including the Kamloops Blazers. There's no Oilers that are attached to this deal here, but I have to mention this deal. The Kamloops Blazers went to acquire Olen Zellweger, yes, the Anaheim Ducks pick and defenseman for the Canadian World Junior team, and forward Ryan Hofer. Get your notepads out, you might have to write this down. Caden Hamill, Drew Anglot, Rylan Pierce, Jack Backer, a first-round pick in 2023, a first-round pick in 2024, a first-round pick in 2025, a first-round pick in 2026, a second-round pick in 2023, a conditional second-round pick in 2026, a third-round pick in 2025, a fourth-round pick in 2023, a fifth-round pick in 2024, and a sixth-round pick in 2026. 10 draft picks. 10 draft picks in this deal. 6 players, including Zellweger and Hofer as well. Probably the craziest trade ever. I'm sure you've heard of it by now, but that is just an absolutely insane deal. But let's keep talking about Edmonton Oilers prospects, as an Edmonton Oilers prospect was also moved on the deadline, a player that we talked about last week who may be seeing a move as well, and that is Jake Chiasson, as Jake Chiasson will make his way to the Saskatoon Blades for a 2023 first round pick, a 2025 second round pick, and a 2026 conditional second round pick. So far this year, Jake Chiasson's had a really good year. 10 goals, 18 assists, 28 points in 37 games, and he's on pace in 70 games for 19 goals, 34 assists, and 53 points. An interesting name to watch out for the Edmonton Oilers in the future. Probably a guy who, if is not in Brandon next year, will probably be in Bakersfield. A guy kind of similar to Ty Tullio as well. So watch for Jake Chiasson. As we've mentioned throughout our prospect reports, especially in the CHL, watch out for players who are coming to Edmonton to play against the Oil Kings. Now we're going to have to update that for Jake Chiasson and the Saskatoon Blades. Either way, a crazy day in the WHL trade deadline. Maybe the Edmonton Oilers should take notes. Either way, let's wrap it up there, as tomorrow the Edmonton Oilers take on the Anaheim Ducks at the Pond for an 8 o'clock puck drop. Tomorrow we will have a full preview of that game against the Ducks, and hopefully, at the end of that one, we can play La Bamba, baby.